right, good morning and good evening and good night. And for some people, it's probably tomorrow already, and for some people, still yesterday. So, thank you everybody for being here. This is a really important meeting, and I know it's not all that comfortable for some of you, but this is the last step in a long process of being involved in this really important standard. We're waiting for one of our board members, Sandy, who's probably also in the middle of the night, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully she will join us soon. And then we have Tom as the chair of the IAASB as a public observer in the meeting. So welcome, Tom. It's nice to see you here. And it talks to the importance of the meeting for you as well. We have been fortunate, thank you, Naraya and Pavel, and under your leadership, Martin, for the very extensive documents that you've put together for our pack to certify. We also were able to get the documents in time from the IAASB, so I think we can probably kick off. Martin, if you're comfortable, I'm going to go straight to Naraya to maybe just talk, as you always do, Naraya, at a high level through the detail where we are. It's all in the pack, but I do think for the sake of good order and for considering the importance of this, let's just talk through where we are with our public interest issues, due process. So I'm going to give Naraya time to talk through all of that, and then I'll pause if there are any questions or comments from anybody. So over to you. Thanks, Naraya.
Thank you very much, Linda, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to everyone, and thank you for joining. Yes, it's been a long process, although shorter than for other standards, and I think it's also we should also thank Billy and the team that they've put together the package, the supporting package with the basis for conclusion and all the clear documentation that they provided us with track changes, so it was easier to follow and do the review faster, so that we could advance some of the work. I will just cover, as you said, very high level and briefly. I won't say anything that is a surprise, I hope, for anyone, but just for the record. So the IAASB approved ISA 5000 on sustainability assurance in September, and they've submitted their documentation for the PIOB to consider certification and whether the process and the development of the standard follow due process and is responsive to the public interest. We've reviewed the standard, the basis for conclusion that provides rationale for the decisions made. We've reviewed comment letters that were provided on the consultation. We've reviewed minutes of the board meetings, and obviously we've observed all the meetings that IAASB had throughout the process and since its inception. So even before the project proposal, up to the approval. We've attended some of the roundtables that the IAASB held to promote and explain the exposure draft. And we've also assessed on our own the standard under the PIF, so under the qualitative characteristics and other elements of the PIF. The PIOB raised several comments or suggestions in our public interest issues list. They're not necessarily all of them issues, but they're comments and recommendations. So they were 9 themes throughout, and they are listed in the document that we've prepared and in our public interest issues list. The IAASB has attempted to address them and meet what we were asking. Some of those requests were not only the PIOBs, there were also suggestions in the comment letters from several stakeholders. And there are three, one is split in 2 that remain outstanding, and we acknowledge that some of them, they're more for implementation. So obviously they are outstanding because we will need to see how the standard implements and that there is a response to challenges that may arise. The other 2 that might be more substantive that the IAASB has acknowledged and has tried to address them, even if not fully, is communication, two-way communication with assurance providers, and in particular with auditors. So there are some provisions in the standard and application material, but is not a full two-way. There is not a full two-way communication prescribed per se, although there is recommendation for timely communication. So we would expect that there might be some development in the future to address this when there is more time. Also, addressing CAMs, so key audit matters or key assurance matters in the audit report. That's something that we had, and several other stakeholders also raised in their comment letters, and is not directly addressed in the standard. And we understand the rationale, but we would keep the issue, and we will follow up and monitor that. And finally, what I already mentioned is the coordination with IESBA until IESBA finalize their standard, and then the continued coordination with IESBA during implementation to address any challenges that may arise during implementation. So we understand some of those items in nature need to stay, and we will continue, and they don't impede considering that the standard meets and addresses or is responsive to the public interest. So the PIF qualitative characteristics, the public interest framework characteristics, they are all addressed to some level. Some of them will also need to be assessed as the standard is implemented, and it can be further assessed in the future. But overall, we are comfortable with what we've reviewed, and I think the board has also, up to now, been relatively comfortable with what we have. So the conclusion of the staff is that the standard meets due process and is responsive to the public interest, and that the PIOB should approve the certification. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Naraya. Can I just check if there are any hands, any questions to Naraya at this time? We've got a very clear recommendation. Tom.
Thank you very much for the introduction of Naraya, and I really agree with you in a sense that the coordination between two boards is critical, not only in the finalizing these standards, but also in the implementation as well, because we have a recent experience of the issue of the PI issue, and we can clearly understand that the translation or the interpretation of the same word between the IWSB and the ESBA may raise a big issue. So this is a very good experience of the, how can I say, it's a sort of the lesson we have to learn. And the one small question I would like to ask Neria is that the very technical, very small point at the, in your note, it says there are 146 comment letters. And then in basis for conclusion on the page 295, it says that the counting of the comment is 143. That's the 146, as you mentioned. Perhaps it's because there is some sort of the comment letter from the MGs are included or not included. So, but I think that's the in the outreach process, many presentation is will refer to the number or the counting of the comment resistance. Should we use then 146 or should we use 143? Thank you.
Can I respond, or do you want to take?
Yes, Naraya, please come in.
Yeah. Yes, I think I mentioned it in the document as well. There were 3 late submissions. So I believe the IWSB took into account the comments from those 3 late submissions, but they didn't count them in their statistics. So that's the difference, those 3 late submissions.
Yes, Thanks. It's true, but at the same time, it included the comment letter from the MG, which is very important in the sense that it concerns the group level. So, I think it might be appropriate if that comment will be included in
the comment is
algorithm.
included. So they consider the comments, but they did not update the count. But the comments were taken on board.
Thank you, Naraya. Robert, and then Mark.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. Hello, Tom. Both Toms, I guess, but Tom Seidenstein in the middle of the night. I just have one question, Naraya, just in relation to the analysis of the public interest framework. There are two caveats in the qualitative characteristics. I can certainly understand the second one, which relates to implementability. And I might just say there was a very helpful discussion at the SAC meeting last week about the implementation of these standards, which was very helpful, and we will be able to talk about that on a later occasion. But I just had a question about the scope one. So scope, you've got yes with caveat. And I just wonder if you could just expand on why that is a caveat there, because it looks as if all of those concerns have been addressed. So are you able just to respond on that, please?
Yes. So I thought maybe it was strong to say caveat, but I included there, even considering a broad sense of scope, the two items that are not fully addressed from our public interest issues list, the communication or two-way communication and the CAM issue. So that's why I thought, and I understand it's an overarching standard. So it's impossible to cover absolutely everything. That's why I thought it is something that is not fully addressed from our recommendations, but it still is understandable. It doesn't mean it's not fully met either. It's somewhere partially. I think it's enough for an overarching standard. I think that's where the board landed as well with those two issues, that we understand they will remain open. And that was the reason why I qualified the yes.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate and accept that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually thought in both instances, caveat is probably almost a little bit too strong, Naraya, because you're right. The one is two-way communication and the other one is CAMS, which we say are probably topics for future enhancements or future projects or additional standards. I thought similarly, the one on implementation is not a caveat. It is just the standard is the way in which we look at it now implementable, but we are encouraging the ISSB, and we will do the same with IESPA, with such a new standard, just keep your eye on it and create a mechanism in case there are unintended consequences. So I'm very comfortable with your recommendation that we as the board are comfortable that our public interest issues have been addressed. We recognize in balancing all of these public interest criteria that some of these things will be picked up later and some of them will be responded to when, when the ISSB potentially run into some realities of implementation. Mark, can I go to you?
Yeah, good morning, or whatever, everyone. I think firstly, I should say that I think the ISSB is to be congratulated on this standard, producing it in a tight timetable. And not only the fact that they've managed to achieve that, but also the way in which they've gone about it, and the process that has stood behind the standard that, of course, we've all been observing over the last couple of years or so. And thank you also to Naraya for preparing our PI analysis document. I do, on that document, I do have some edits on it, which I'm happy to share after the meeting. I don't want to go into the detail. Focusing on the PI issues that are discussed, I think that for me, the most important one to be happy about is under section 4.6 of our document. And that is the issue around the group components and the use of sort of group practitioners or other practitioners, really addressing the point that the monitoring group made earlier on this year in that area. Are we satisfied that the standard as written and specifically the presumption of sort of sufficient control over a practitioner's work on a group component adequately addresses the public interest issue that the monitoring group raised? For me, that I think is probably the most potentially high profile and important aspect of this.
Thanks, Naraya.
Yes, so, and I think we this was discussed at the last meeting in September, or at least we discussed. The IWSB, or the task force that work on this, they introduce several requirements and application material. So in addition, so there is the presumption that the engagement leader or the engagement leader will have that will be sufficiently and appropriately involved in a group component. So there is that presumption. There are also provisions to understand when that is not possible, or when it is expected that that could not be met, and that there is that there are access limitations, or that the engagement has already taken place and it's already completed, so there is no possibility to be engaged, and it's reflecting something that is already happening in practice. So it's just trying to be realistic about what is going to happen in these engagements, where there might have been already an assurance engagement that has happened when the group engagement comes in. So, and they do recognize, and I think that was also one of the concerns that the MG letter brought about, is yes, but if this becomes a recurrent engagement, then that engagement leader should be able to be involved in the subsequent years. And they do have application material to recognize that fact, that then if this is recurrent, then there should be part of the planning and strategy for the following year. So there are provisions to limit that that exception, if you will. It's an exception to this presumption, but yeah, so it's impossible to limit absolutely all engagements that could happen around the group boundary, but there are constraints, and that's the primary, or the core will be the group engagement leader needs to be appropriately involved. So there are provisions. We'll see if there are other exceptions that come up in practice, will need to be addressed later on, but I think there are guardrails to try and limit it.
Yeah. Do we know whether the monitoring group is happy with that outcome in the standard, that it accepts that?
I don't have a response for that, Mark. I need to look at if Tom, I think I don't know if Tom has the answer, but I don't know if they've had discussions, and they have follow-up discussions with BMG members, but I don't have a yes or no answer, Mark.
And I've certainly had in many of my engagements with the MG and individual MG members the opportunity to also ask. You remember, we're not the auditor of the MG comments, but it is important that the regulators are comfortable with a standard as important as this. So it was definitely my understanding, and Martin, I know you've had some engagement, and Tom and these boards had lots of engagement with MG members subsequent to the exposure draft and where things were moving, that they were all very, very comfortable with where it's ending. And I see Tom nodding. Janine?
Yes, thank you, Linda, and hello, everyone. Yes, I have a question, Nerea, for that's around the key audit matters. What you also said, we consider that a PI issue, and as it is an important issue, and the sustainability assurance standard is at least in some parts of the world, it starts being used for particularly the PI audits. And then if you compare it to financial statement audit, key audit matters then pop up and could be very useful for users to get some more information about the findings behind the audit report that the assurance report that the assurance providers had. But my question is around the last sentence where in the memo it says, however, the PIOB encouraged the IASB to consider a provision in ISA 5000 allowing the voluntary inclusion of the CAM section in sustainability assurance reports from the outset. What is the status around that? Is that foreseen in any way, or is that still an open issue? That is my question. And then I also wanted to say, and that is also what Mark talked about, is that about the sufficiently and appropriately being involved of the group sustainability assurance provider in group component work, assurance work. I think, and this is an issue that we also brought up, and later on the MG also further asked questions around this topic. And there's also this link with independence requirements. But for me, I think the most important thing is the way it's now also with the further application material in the ISA 5000, that it's more an exception in terms of, it should not be the rule, but an exception. That's fine. But to me, it also has something with, okay, this is really an area where there needs to be quite some good monitoring, what's happening in practice. And it touches also upon, I think, a very important thing is when there are unintended consequences in practice, in the way this standard is being used, because it's so new. There are also non-professional accountants using this standard. That there is a quick response mechanism for unintended consequences. I also consider that as a very important thing for the way forward, apart from the implementation guidance, that there is some quick response mechanism in place to do some quick fixes, if you may call it like that. So thank you.
And maybe, Nerea, before you respond about, is it the voluntary option? And thank you, Janine. We do now have in our public interest issues, and we will keep it there for both the IASB and IESPA, that it is important in the implementation of the standard to keep an eye on what happens, whether it's in camps or anywhere else, unintended consequences, and create an enabler to respond to that. So I think that point is very well and clearly made in our public interest issues going forward. But Nerea, do you just want to talk about the voluntary option in the application material or wherever for camps?
Yes, I think so. That sentence was kept just to show the historical progress. So we had asked to have something in the standard from the beginning. It's not there, and we acknowledge it. And maybe the order should have been the opposite. So, okay, we have asked from the beginning. However, we understand that your rationale for not including it. So, yeah, take that point.
Yeah.
I think there is possibility, and I think that's what IAASB has presented several times. There is still, it's not precluded, it's not there, it's not encouraged, but there are some provisions that allow to include other paragraphs, other matters in the report. So there is possibility to provide what is known as key audit matters, even if you can call it key audit key assurance matters. But it's, yeah, probably the order now that you mention it is not entirely correct.
Thank you for your clarification. I was really looking for it. Where is the last change that I maybe wasn't aware about, but I couldn't find it.
It was just an intention to keep the point that we had is historically, but maybe, it was not in the logical order.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nerea. And before I go to Begonia, I'm just going to ask if there are any further comments to put up your hand, because if I don't see any other further hands after this, and Begonia has spoken, I'm going to ask the board to vote on this. So, Begonia, over to you.
Thank you, Linda, and hello to everybody. Well, first of all, I want also to congratulate the IAASB for achieving this standard in such a short period, and thank Nerea for the tremendous job in putting together all this package with such amount of detail. I mean, I'm going to vote after. I'm happy with the proposal to certificate this, but I want to emphasize that there are some caveats, small caveats, but some of them might be solved later when the post-implementation review comes, for instance. But the communication between the auditor of financial statements and the assurer of the sustainability reporting, I think this is something that could be solved without waiting so long. So I encourage the IAASB to put more emphasis on that lack of, insisting, not just a recommendation. This should be much more, imposed. I mean, it's important that they talk and they understand each other. So that's my only comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Begonia. And I see no further hands, so maybe Philippe, there you go. Over to you.
Thank you, Linda. A good part of the day to all of you. I'd like to add my congratulations to those which were expressed. Congratulations, Tom, for your leadership and for the work of the team, because the result is very impressive. And we have really noticed the efforts, notably this summer, to react to the comments of the PIOB regarding the coordination between the two boards and so on. And I think it was fruitful and well listened on your side. And really the result, the quality of the standard is outstanding. At this stage, I only have one question, which is for Nerea, regarding the list of comments and suggestions resulting from the replies to the exposure draft. There are many interesting points in that, and the memo indicates that there were decisions, which is quite normal, by the IAASB to include some of them and to exclude with some explanations. And I'd like to know if we are satisfied by, the decisions made by the IAASB regarding these comments and suggestions, because the memo is very accurate but descriptive. And in terms of assessment of the decisions of the IAASB, are we comfortable with the decisions which were taken regarding the comments on the exposure draft?
Thank you, Nerea. And you do make a statement in the document about due process, and it links a little bit to that, but maybe you just want to expand on it.
Yes, so I mean, we do follow the technical debate, obviously, and some of the public interest do have some technicalities in them. but we are not there to draft, as we always discuss. But overall, yes, and a lot of the comments, they run around a lot of the themes that we also have raised. They are much more detailed, of course, and we haven't captured absolutely 100% of the comments that were raised, but a lot of the most significant themes we had also raised, and we are relatively comfortable with how the IAASB has addressed, or if not addressed, that they have committed or they have acknowledged and have made a statement that they will take on board these comments at a later stage, because they cannot do it now on a timely basis on an overarching statement. So standard, sorry. So yes, and I think the basis for conclusion, it has done a very good job of both summarizing those comments, distilling the themes, and the thought process behind how they arrived to the changes they made. And they do clearly state, we didn't change the requirements, or we didn't think that the principles that we had to be changed, but we acknowledged that there were concerns in this area. So we did this other thing, and we added more application material to try to clarify this process. So I think it is very well described, and in general, yes, we are comfortable how they address them.
Thank you,
you.
Naraya. Mark?
Yeah, just one comment or one thought, really, again, focusing on the actual PI issues, and that is in section 4.9 of our paper, where we list the actually relatively few outstanding PI issues. I wondered whether we should add to that list the fact that we sort of await a separate standard, separate ISA on the group sustainability standard, or assurance, should I say.
It's an open public interest issue, Mark, so that's something that we keep on our list for the next round. So it's not as if those two public interest issues that are there on two-way communication and groups is something that we will keep on our outstanding list of public interest for the future. So basically what you're saying is, yes, we are doing it.
Yeah, my point is, we in that list in 4.9, we do identify two-way communication, CAMs, and implementation. I was just wondering whether we should add to that list the group assurance standard.
Yeah, with reference to somewhere in future go into more detail. Let's debate our public interest issues again when we circle back to that discussion. But the Naraya, maybe just make a little note to say that we do need to have a debate on that. It's probably something that we need to debate when we talk about the next version of the strategy and work plan. Okay. All right. I think we can wrap this up. Thank you, Tom. Firstly, let me just say, Tom, a lot of the PIOB members said that, and let me just see if I can pull it all together to say thank you very much. This was a really difficult but a very impressive piece of work. For me, what stands out is not only the timeline, because there was a lot of pressure to meet timelines, and you were actually really quite early with an exposure draft that was in a fairly good state. But I have to add to that your board's responsiveness to the comments received, there were quite fundamental comments that needed quite a lot of work, and the responsiveness of the IAASB to respond to that and to really do justice to that, because you can move deck chairs around, but you really thought about it carefully. And even towards I remember the debates we had on groups, for example, and how you pick those up, drop some of the additional options when it links to the ethics code, etc. So very, very well done, and congratulations to you and your board for the work done on that. So Tom, thank you. And we do applaud you for that. I'm going to give you a minute at the end. I know it's a public session, but I do think it's appropriate to give you a minute at the end to say something from your side. The one other thing that I just want to also say from the PIOB side is similarly, this project with its timeline put a significant amount of strain on our board members who had to, it's a small group, and had to do a lot of additional observation, a lot of thinking, a lot of extra meetings. And thank you to all of you that not only participated as observers, but also everybody else in sharing their thinking so that we can really crystallize what we believe is the public interest on that. So thank you very much to the board members. And lastly, Martin, to you, and I have to say Pavel had to pick this up when we were really in trouble with no staff at that point in time to pick it up, and Pavel came in fresh. Thank you, Pavel. Naraya came back seamlessly as if she's always been there and haven't been away for a while. So thank you, especially to the two of you, but under very important leadership and calm and collected guidance from Martin. So thank you very much for the staff in the manner in which you've done this in an extremely professional, thorough, detailed and sensible way. So thank you to all of you. And Tom, I just want to give you one moment from your side before I ask my board members to cast their final vote.
Well, I just want to thank Linda and everyone else. I hope I'm a little bit cogent here. This session is brought to you by the power of caffeine right now at 3:07 in the morning. But it's a really proud moment for the IAASB. A proud moment mainly because the process and the strategy worked here, and we wouldn't have gotten here without the collaboration with bodies with like yours, the MG, the thousands of people who participated in some form or another in the standard development. And we're humble enough to know that not everything will be perfect on day one. And what we need to do next is to support the standard and support the implementation of the standard and do all we can collectively for those who have an interest in the system to get it adopted and implemented in a high quality fashion throughout the world. So I just really want to thank you as a board for your collaboration throughout and your advice, sometimes challenging advice, which is what oversight's supposed to do. And I look forward for other processes working so well in the future.
Thank you very much, Tom. And the power of caffeine is probably exactly what's not going to make you sleep after this. But anyway, can I ask the board PIOB members by a show of hands whether you support the PIOB certifying this standard as proposed by our oversight staff? Everybody in favor? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Well done, Tom. Thank you very much to our staff. And I'll remind everybody from a certification point of view that was successful. We will obviously communicate this, put the certification on our website, but we have agreed that the more strategic communication detail on this will go out when the IESPA standard is considered early in January. So thank you, everybody. I don't believe there's any other business for the day. Tom, you can go back to bed with a few other people that also got up in the middle of the night. Thank you, PIOB members and staff, for all of this. Much appreciated, and take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.